When they arrived in town, they had no proof, not a single photograph. They did not even have a precise word to describe what they had just lived through. They only had broken breathing, sweat running down their bodies, their hands still trembling. The wide eyes of people who had left something behind them, but were not sure that something had truly stayed behind. 4 people had come out of an old abandoned military area just outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Still in shock, they told the authorities they had lived through a nightmare at the edge of reality. Something, or someone, had followed them. Not a man, not an ordinary animal, not just any shadow. Something. The authorities went to check, flashlights in hand. They searched deserted roads, abandoned buildings, dark fields. But they found nothing. And perhaps that was exactly what made the matter even worse. Because when something seemingly impossible leaves evidence behind, it becomes a case. When it leaves nothing, it becomes myth. Point Pleasant did not seem like the kind of place where a legend could be born. It was a small river town, low houses, quiet streets, familiar shops, people of habit. The Ohio River flowed nearby, slow and dark, like a seamstress's thread stitching together everyone's lives year after year. By day, everything seemed normal. People worked, came home, greeted their neighbors. The lights turned on and off at the same hours every day. Nothing on the surface announced the mystery. But every town has a boundary, a point where the lit streets end, a corner where the houses become fewer, a zone where darkness is no longer merely the absence of light, but a presence. In Point Pleasant, that boundary led to a place the locals knew well, an abandoned place, isolated, ambiguous even before the story began. They called it the TNT area. The TNT area was not a name invented to frighten people. It was what remained of an old military complex built during the Second World War. Explosives and ammunition had been produced and stored there. There were several storage buildings, technical structures, secondary roads, and isolated facilities. Then the war had ended. The world had moved on. But those places had stayed there, empty, corroded and rusted, half hidden by vegetation, as if no one had ever truly decided what to do with them. By day, the TNT area might have seemed like nothing more than an old abandoned piece of America. But at night, it changed nature. The roads grew narrow. The buildings seemed closer. The bunkers, covered by grass and thyme, looked like trapdoors leading to something buried. The wind moved through the empty structures. The trees barely moved. It was not hard to imagine that something could hide there. The difficult part was accepting that someone might have truly seen it. November 15th, 1966. Roger Scarberry, Linda Scarberry, Steve Millette, Mary Millette. 2 young couples, 4 people in one car. They were not looking for a creature. They were not investigators. They were not paranormal enthusiasts. They had not entered the night to chase a legend. And that matters. Because many monster stories, or close encounters of the third kind, begin with someone who wants to see something. Someone looking for tracks. Someone carrying a camera. Someone entering the woods with a theory already in mind. But that night, according to the witness's account, there was no mission and no hidden agenda. Only a car, a road, the dark, and an old abandoned military area. Maybe they were talking. Maybe they were laughing. Maybe, for a few minutes, everything seemed like an ordinary provincial night. Then something changed. Not outside. Not yet. Inside the car. The silence came before the fear, as if for one instant time had slowed down. The headlights cut through the darkness. The light slid across the asphalt, then over the trees, then across the worn walls of the buildings along the roadside. And for one instant, nothing happened. Then they saw a figure. It was standing still.
What's that?
Near an old abandoned building in the T&T area. Not close enough to be recognized immediately, not far enough to be ignored. At first, perhaps they tried to convince themselves it was a man, then an animal, or a shadow created by the headlights. But the closer the car moved, the more every explanation seemed to lose strength. The figure was tall, dark, almost human. Almost. And it was exactly that almost that made it disturbing. Because it did not seem human enough to be called a person, and it did not seem animal enough to be accepted as a wild beast. It was in between, in that dangerous place where the mind loses its grip. For a moment, no one truly understood what they were looking at. Then they noticed a shocking detail. 2 large red eyes, still. Too large to belong to an ordinary animal. Too motionless to seem like a simple reflection. According to the accounts, they did not merely seem to reflect the headlights. They seemed to glow on their own. And at that point, inside the car, something changed, and terror took over. The body understands certain things before reason does. Breathing shortens, hands tighten, eyes search for an escape, voices rise. Someone says to leave, someone falls silent with panic. Then, the figure moved, and from behind its back, enormous wings unfolded, dark, spread open against the night. Roger Scarborough, terrified, accelerated, trying to lose that monster. The car moved away from the area, but the figure did not stay behind to watch. According to the first accounts, the creature followed them. Not as a man would, not as an animal chasing prey, not as an ordinary bird flies. From the statements given to the authorities, the description was more ambiguous, harder for the human mind to absorb. It seemed to glide through the air, moving without any effort, as if the night sky were its natural environment. The car raced toward Point Pleasant at full speed. Inside, 4 people were trying to understand whether what they had seen was still at their heels.
Is it following us?
Outside, the road became a fragile line. The headlights trembled across the asphalt. The trees passed at the sides like shadows too close. And behind the car, the thing stayed near. And in that silence, the danger became real. The red eyes appeared and disappeared in the dark. The body seemed suspended in the air. The wings barely moved. And with every passing second, it became harder to believe it was only a frightened animal. One of the most unsettling parts of the account is the contrast. On the ground, the creature reportedly appeared clumsy, strange, almost out of place. But in the air, according to the witnesses, it became fast, fluid in its movements, far too effective. So much so that at one point it reached the car and struck the outside roof with a thud, making everyone inside jump. And when the car finally arrived in town, the 4 witnesses had nothing in their hands that could convince anyone. They had only a story, their shocked faces, their breathing still broken, and an image they could not remove from their minds. 2 red eyes, enormous wings, some kind of humanoid from another world. Something inexplicable and just as disturbing. Careful though, here we have to be cautious, because the next day that impossible story did not remain only in the memory of 4 witnesses. It ended up in a local newspaper. The Point Pleasant Register tried to give it a headline, but even the headline seemed not to know what to say. Almost as if even the newspaper could not describe the phenomenon. Couples see man-sized bird, creature, something. From that moment on, Point Pleasant began listening to every sound differently. And in the days that followed, new testimonies emerged. People began to gather courage and speak out. According to some accounts, even before the 2 couples' sighting, a man named Newell Partridge had noticed something strange on his property in Salem, West Virginia. The television had reportedly begun making a metallic noise. His dog, Bandit, became agitated. Then, outside, in the dark, Partridge allegedly saw 2 red circles, like reflectors, like eyes. Bandit ran toward those points of light.
Stop!
There was a short whimper. From that day on, the dog was never found again. Perhaps it was only a coincidence, but from that moment, in the Mothman case, even the silence of a missing dog began to carry weight. Then came other accounts. 2 volunteer firefighters said they had seen a large bird with red eyes. Other residents spoke of a figure near the TNT area. And a few days later, a man named Tom Urey claimed he saw the creature in broad daylight near Route 62. Not at night, not among the bunkers, not in a place already loaded with fear, but in the morning, near a field. According to his account, the figure rose from the ground, almost vertically, like a helicopter. Then it gained altitude, and for a moment what had seemed impossible in the dark existed again in the light. A single testimony can be a mistake, a misperception. But when the voices increase and repeat the same pattern, the question changes. It is no longer only, what the hell did those 4 people see? It becomes, why did others begin seeing the same thing? Perhaps that night they did not see a monster, but a misidentified animal. A large crane, a heron. According to some, perhaps even an enormous barn owl. A bird blinded by the headlights, frightened by human presence. It is not a weak hypothesis. Darkness changes shapes. Headlights distort outlines, and the mind completes what the eyes cannot understand. But this explanation does not erase everything, because the witnesses did not speak only of a large bird. They spoke of an almost human figure, of red eyes, of a pursuit, and of a way of moving they could not place in any earthly living creature. Science can conclude, wild animal. Psychology can say, fear. Folklore can say, monster. But that night, inside that car, there were 4 people who wanted only to get back to town. and something that seemed to follow them from the dark. The case began to spread. Curious people arrived from nearby towns, paranormal investigators, writers, people drawn to those stories like moths to a flame. Among them was John Keel. With the Mothman prophecies, that creature no longer remained only a figure seen near the TNT area. It became the center of something larger. Strange lights, mysterious phone calls, UFOs, coincidences, premonitions. And then, according to some reconstructions, the men in black arrived too. Unknown figures, dark, elegant suits. They asked unusual questions. They visited journalists and witnesses. They did not seem to be searching for the monster. Instead, they seemed almost intent on intimidating anyone who spoke about it or investigated it. They were looking for anyone who had seen something. But here we have to remain clear-headed, because many of these accounts belong to a gray area made of testimonies, personal memories, and later reconstructions. And yet, even after removing everything that is most fragile, something remains. A dark, winged figure with ruby-colored eyes. An uneasy town. And a question no one ever managed to answer. Who, or what, was haunting Point Pleasant? And for how long? Then the story met tragedy. On December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed into the Ohio River during rush hour. 46 people died. The investigations pointed to a structural cause, a fracture in the steel, a failure that had remained hidden and neglected for too long. But for some residents, that explanation was not enough to erase everything that had happened before. The apparitions, the stories, the feeling that something had been moving around Point Pleasant for months. And so, in the memory of the town, Mothman changed shape. It was no longer only a creature. It became an omen, a dark warning. A superstition born from pain, perhaps, but strong enough to survive the tragedy. The bridge did not create the mystery. It turned it into legend. Today, Point Pleasant does not hide Mothman. It displays him. There is a statue, a museum, even a festival in his memory. The creature that once frightened the town has become part of its identity. And there is something deeply human and resilient in that. A community takes a fear, a horror so deep and inexplicable that it disturbed its peace for years, and transforms it into a symbol. It places it at the center of the square and looks it straight in the face, as if to say, "You watched us from the dark, but today we are no longer afraid. Now we are the ones watching you." But behind the folklore, the same question remains. Is it truly possible for a creature to become only a legend, without even a grain of truth at its origin? What did those people truly see in the TNT area? Because there is no doubt that something happened. An animal? A human hybrid? A trick of perception? A close encounter of the third kind? Or something that, for one instant, crossed the edge of our world and then went back? Point Pleasant has never received a definitive answer. It has received suppositions, theories, and possible explanations. But none of this has erased the collective memory of a story. A car on a road, and two scarlet eyes in the dark. There are mysteries that do not ask to be believed. They ask only to be remembered. And Mothman, since that night, has never been forgotten by Point Pleasant, and probably never will be.